I'm Jim Burke, producer of the Way Forward Regenerative Conversations podcast. This presentation is a companion piece to our YouTube video where Dr. John Izu and co-host Alain Gauthier sat down with Catherine Ringham, an elder activist and lifelong Minneapolis resident, for one of the most honest conversations about immigration I've heard. Look at these two images. On the left, a city block that looks like an occupation zone. On the right, the America most of us actually live in. The gap between those two images is what this conversation is about. We use Google NotebookLM to create the slide graphics and Anthropic's Claude cowork to help draft these narration notes. However you come to this issue, our invitation is simple. Stay open. Before we get into Minneapolis, we need to name why this issue is so explosive. It's not just about immigration. It's about identity. Who belongs, and what kind of country we want to be. On the political side, as CNN's Van Jones observed, neither party actually wants to solve the immigration issue because then they couldn't run against each other on it. It drives fear, turnout, and extreme positions in a 50-50 country. On the human side, immigration touches our economy, our history, and our deepest sense of belonging. As Dr. John put it on our show, this is not an abstract policy debate. It's a human one, and human debates require human conversations, not slogans. What our guest, Catherine Ringham, described was not routine immigration enforcement. It felt, in her words, like a city under siege. The federal government surged over 150 ICE and Border Patrol agents into Minneapolis. Their tactics were extreme. Unmarked ghost cars with mismatched license plates, facial recognition software, tear gas against protesters, agents entering homes without warrants, positioning near food banks and churches. Approximately 4,000 people were detained, and the vast majority had no criminal record. Lawsuits are piling up. As Governor Walz said, it should not take 50 ICE agents to arrest one guy in a library. The fear wasn't limited to undocumented residents. It spread through the entire community. This slide makes the human cost concrete. ICE agents position themselves near grocery stores and food banks. The most basic act of feeding your family became a potential encounter with federal agents. At schools, parents were forced to have conversations no parent should have. If I don't come home, here's who you go to. Teachers reported traumatized children unable to concentrate. At workplaces, raids disrupted agriculture, meat processing, construction, and healthcare, industries that depend on immigrant workers to function. As Catherine told us, the emotional impact was less about headlines and more about daily life, creating terror and confusion. People stopped living normally. That is the human cost. Here's where the story turns, because what happened next may be genuinely historic. Over 30,000 citizens signed up for observer and upstander training, not professional activists, ordinary Minnesotans who learned how to document ICE activity, stay steady under stress, and protect constitutional rights. They built encrypted networks on Signal and WhatsApp to track ICE convoys in real time. And here's one detail that captures the spirit. Delivery drivers bringing groceries to families too afraid to leave home were told, if stopped by ICE, to eat the paper with the delivery addresses so agents couldn't target those households. As Catherine told us, I'm really proud of the Twin Cities. They responded to fear, anger, and grief with courage, creativity, and care. Journalists are already predicting historians will study Minneapolis model. Dr. John Izu shared something personal on the show. His grandparents immigrated from Sicily in the early 1900s. Today, Italian Americans feel no prejudice, but back then they were called guineas and greaseballs and targeted by the Ku Klux Klan, even lynched. They were accused of taking jobs, changing the culture, and being impossible to assimilate. Sound familiar? 1924, Congress passed the Johnson-Reed Act, shutting down immigration for nearly 4 decades. It targeted Asian immigrants almost completely and severely restricted Southern Europeans. The reasons cited were the same ones we hear today. One tragic consequence, when millions of Jewish people tried to flee Nazi Germany, that act was one reason America didn't open its doors. As Dr. John Ezel said, we've always struggled with outsiders in America. That's why this conversation is so important. This timeline tells a staggering story. The last major immigration reform was in 1986, nearly 40 years ago. It legalized millions, penalized employers who hired undocumented workers, and increased border enforcement. A genuine compromise. In 2006, Senators McCain and Kennedy introduced a grand bipartisan bill. It passed the Senate 62-36 with 23 Republican votes. Then the right wing of the Republican Party killed it in the House. It hasn't seen the light of day since. As Van Jones observed, neither party wants to solve this because then they couldn't run against each other on it. The system rewards extremism and punishes compromise. The grand bargain is sitting right there. What's missing is political courage. Dr. Ezel shared a conversation he had with a woman in her late 70s from rural Minnesota. She had voted for Trump, but she told him 3 stories. First, a man from Spain, 30 years in their town, no criminal record. ICE deported him to a country where he has no one, she said. It just isn't right. Second, a Mexican family's popular bakery closed out of fear of ICE raids, she said. We really missed that bakery. Third, 8 immigrants with criminal records were deported from the local prison. She said, I think that was a good thing. She didn't speak in political slogans. She was talking about the human story, the worker, the business, the rule of law. That woman is not an outlier. She is an American. This slide explains something fundamental about American politics right now. America is a 50-50 nation. Every election for the last 26 years has been decided by razor-thin margins. Yet every party, when they win, acts like they have an 80-20 mandate. When Biden opened the border, Americans didn't want that. When Trump launched mass deportations, Americans didn't want that either. Both parties executed policies the majority actively opposed. As Ezra Klein has written, the closer elections become, the less incentive there is for compromise, because each party thinks they might win the next one outright. Competition that is too close breeds less cooperation, not more. There are 2 big myths about immigration in America, and both are false. This slide tackles the first one. The myth, Democrats want open borders. The reality, 2026 polling, only about 30% of Democrats support truly open borders. And 79% of Democrats, nearly 8 in 10, say anyone who has committed a crime should be deported. As Dr. John Ezel emphasized on the show, majorities across both parties and independents support stronger border enforcement. That is the actual center of gravity of American opinion. The argument isn't about whether to enforce it, it's about how. Here's the second myth, and it may surprise you even more. The myth, Republicans want mass deportation. The reality, 65% of Republicans agree immigration is good for the United States, and 60% support a path to legal status for people here 10 years or more years who are employed with clean records. There's also a significant split within the party. About 55% identify as MAGA Republicans, and 45% do not. Those non-MAGA Republicans are dramatically more favorable toward a path to status. The extremes are holding the microphone, but they don't represent where most Americans actually are. So what Americans actually agree on? More than you think. Deport criminals, broad partisan agreement, secure borders, nearly universal. A path to status for long-term residents with clean records, supported by majorities in both parties. An economic reality, recognition that immigrants are essential to agriculture, healthcare, construction, and other industries our economy depends on. Dr. John Ezel put it, the interesting thing is Americans are actually pretty well aligned. The extremes are holding the conversation. The grand compromise is sitting in plain sight. It has been since 2006. What missing isn't public will, it's political courage. Catherine said something on our show that I think is the most important reframe in the entire presentation. Immigration is not a crisis to eliminate, it's a force to manage wisely. On the left, crisis management, ICE raids, militarized response, community fear. On the right, force management, rule of law, economic truth, and reliable legal pathways people can count on. Catherine also pointed out that immigration pressures are only growing. Climate displacement, political instability, and economic inequality are accelerating globally. The question isn't whether we have immigration, it's whether we manage it wisely or respond in panic. Catherine said something on our show that I think is the most important reframe in the entire presentation. Immigration is not a crisis to eliminate. It's a force to manage. Our co-host, Alain Gauthier, brings a unique perspective. He's been a green card holder for 40 years and shared that for the first time, he would think twice about leaving the country for fear of not being let back in. But what Alain brought that was most powerful was the antidote. In Portland, protesters met ICE with humor and peace. Signs said, "De-ice the streets." When ministers, priests, and rabbis in church meetings were asked how they faced what was coming, their answer was unanimous. "We shall meet them in peace." As Alain put it, the nonviolent means are as important as the end. From fear to love, from isolation to what we call relational energy. That's the direction forward. This is where we always end up, not with an answer, but with a question. What kind of country do we want to be? Dr. John Ezel said in closing, so many of us were once upon a time seen as a danger to American culture, but we actually became an important part of American culture. That's the story of America underneath all the challenges around immigration. We are a country of immigrants from many places who together built something very beautiful. The way forward is not fear or slogans. It's a conversation, honest, grounded, and compassionate. For the full episode, visit thewayforwardpodcast.com. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Amazon. History is not a destination waiting for us to arrive. What we call history will be the results of the actions we take today. Thank you.